Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. We're going into October this year, and for the class of '99, there was a quite a bit of significant horror actually that year. I talked about a couple of horror films with a fellow critic of mine earlier this year, and the rage carry to an end of days. Not necessarily the best of what horror had to offer, but we're going to get into, if not necessarily the best, at least some of the most polarizing. And we're going to start out with a film that ended up being one of the highest grossing movies of the year, was one of the most acclaimed movies of the year, and was nominated for several Oscars. It's M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. Joining me is a filmmaker and actress whose most recent short film, 98.6, is making its way through film festivals. She's also done Out of My Mind, Random, and Ebola. I'm glad to have back on to the podcast Cindy Maples. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Brian.
I I I don't remember if I saw The Sixth Sense on opening day. I know I saw it close to when it opened with my grandfather in 1999. I was up in Ohio visiting, and that's where I went to go see it for the first time. And I know I had the big impact on the movie. I know it had the big impact on me in terms of storytelling, and then of course the twist ending that everybody is pretty well familiar with at this point.
Right.
When I first saw it, and it's a movie that was significant as far as the end of the year. It's one of the movies that really defined the 1999 movie year for a lot of people. Which, when you consider a lot of the movies that did come out this year, that's not no small feat. And it basically made the way for M. Night Shyamalan to open the door for his career that we've seen over the past 20 years rise and fall, and then start to come back up again with his recent movies like The Visit and Split and Glass. What was your first experience with The Sixth Sense?
Yeah, I remember it quite clearly. I don't know if it was opening weekend, but I remember very clearly that it was the Varsity Theater in Carbondale, Illinois, kind of the area that I grew up and where I was living at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it had such a huge impact on me. That was the first time that I ever felt like I'd been duped. You know,
Yeah.
I went to the entire movie thinking that it was this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it was over with, I was like, what? You know, it was like immediately, and I honestly think it was the next day that I went back and saw it again
Mm-hmm.
because it changed everything. The ending changed
Yeah.
everything. And I needed to revisit it because I'm like, how could I be so stupid? How could I have missed all of that? I've never had that kind of experience in the cinema before,
Right.
you know. And of course, that's like the first and last time. I mean, it's happened since, but it for the first time, you know, it's just like after that, you're kind of looking for it. You're actually chasing it. You
Mm-hmm.
want to feel that again.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't happen until years later when The Others came out with Nicole Kidman.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only other time I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was supposed to be. You know?
Right. Yeah, and I certainly, I know I went to go see it multiple times in theaters too. It was one of my favorite movies from that year. And
Absolutely.
the thing that I love, and the thing that when I revisit the movie, and this revisiting it for the podcast was the first time in a few years that I'd seen it. The thing that I really love about this is that not only going back and rewatching it to see the different clues and stuff like that throughout the movie to sort of pick up on, well, is this something, how does he lay it out as the film's progressing that's coming to this
Right.
ending where, and spoiler alert if you have not watched The Sixth Sense, where
What's wrong
the
with you
if
have
if you
not
if
watched?
you're listening to this and you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, I don't know why, but you're coming to when you come to this realization that Dr. Malcolm Crowe, the Bruce Willis character, is in fact a ghost. Um, and the thing that I love about this movie on rewatch, and the thing that I think is so meaningful about it, is that yes, every subsequent time where the story is going as far as the big twist with Crow's character,
Right.
but the film becomes a different. You start to see a more specific thematic trend in the movie as far as what it's about. Once you get that twist out of the way and know what that twist is, then you can really feel sort of what the movie becomes is actually about, as opposed to, oh, it's just a ghost story where the main character happens to be a ghost.
Right, right. And and there were so many red herrings in this that
Mm-hmm.
when you go back and rewatch it, then you start noticing all of those. Like because I even remember thinking once it was over with, but I was like, wait, but he was sitting there in the living room with the mom.
Yeah.
They were having a conversation because your mind automatically makes you think that they're having a conversation
Mm-hmm.
because of the way that scene was purposely set up and going to the restaurant to meet his wife. Same thing, it's set up to make you believe that, she's ignoring him.
Yeah.
And when you go back and rewatch those scenes, it's so obvious at that
Mm-hmm.
point, after that those things weren't really happening.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. As far as the way Shyamalan stages everything in this movie is very deliberately, and you see it in
Oh,
Glass too, which was
yes.
the ending of his Unbreakable trilogy this year. And
Right.
you see the way he builds to very specific things. Now, the twist in Split, where it turns out, oh, this is a sequel to Unbreakable. You just have
Right.
that one scene. You wouldn't necessarily think about that as a sequel to Unbreakable until you see that scene with David Dunn at the end of the movie.
Exactly.
But the way he builds off of that, and when you go back through Split afterwards, it's really, you see how shrewd he is in terms of setting up the narrative that he's progressing toward with those
Yes.
twists.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's so wonderful about this film is that, like I was saying, as far as once you know the twist, you can sort of see the thematic elements and the type of story that Shyamalan is really trying to tell here. And the thing that I love about
Right.
this is that this is ultimately a movie about accepting, being able to move on from tragedy and moving on from traumatic experiences that we've had. And
Absolutely.
you see
Right.
that with Anna, the Olivia Williams character. You see that in Crow, with, and that's the big one. And then you also have the wonderful
And with
relationship.
Cole, I mean, the little boy,
Yeah,
he's absolutely trying to move on from trauma.
yeah, because at first, he's, for most of the movie, and before this, he's treating these ghosts that he's seeing, as as a threat. They're he looks at him as a threat to him, and it's not until Crow comes along that and then Crow starts to piece it together, because of he sees the connection between Cole and the character that Donnie Wahlberg plays at the beginning, that there's something more to why Cole is seeing these uh, seeing dead people. There's something that he hasn't put together yet. And the thing that I
Right.
love about this revelation, it's basically, it's not necessarily, it's not that these ghosts are trying, or dead people are, these these ghosts are basically just trying to communicate with people on the other side,
Exactly.
people they've left behind. And that's the thing
Right.
that's so beautiful, because the girl on, the girl at the end, I mean, we're getting way ahead in the story, but again, if you haven't seen this, I don't know why you're really listening to this anyway. um the girl at the end who was poisoned, uh you you realize that, like, it's not for her, it's not that, it's not she's not trying to communicate with Cole because she wants the truth. Part of it is, yes, she wants the truth to come out, but more importantly, she's trying to make sure her sister is okay. And that's the thing that's
Exactly.
so beautiful, is the fact that it's like, this is basically about repairing, this is about repairing broken relationships. And you
Yeah,
see,
absolutely. And with Dr. Malcolm obviously being the biggest one that's being tried to be repaired.
mhm. And the thing is, it serves so it serves a dual purpose with him, where he's going to be able, once he realizes his truth, he's going to be able to repair his, sort of accept what's happened to him, as well as be able to say what he wanted to say to Anna, his wife, but he also gets a second chance with Cole. And he, because
Exactly.
he, when he died, he had this, he had this feeling, this sense of regret for what happened to Donnie Wahlberg's
Right.
character.
Yeah, that he had let him down. Exactly. Because that's his last thought before he
Yeah.
dies, is that he let this poor boy down. And let's go back. Let's talk about Donnie Wahlberg's performance. It's like what, 3 minutes
Mm-hmm.
worth of film, and
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. The guy lost like 40
Yeah.
pounds to do that role, which is just amazing anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just knocks that role out of the park, and the whole way that entire scene is shot is
Yeah.
just amazing. Just the final and at the end after he shot the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got the gun to his head, and it just kind of pans away
Yeah.
from him. It's just amazing. It's just beautifully shot scene.
Yeah. And the thing about,
Frightening
yeah, that opening is
too.
so,
Who wants to come home and find something like that? And
yeah, the opening of that movie is just so, is it's so wonderful, because you have this first scene with um Colt, with Crow and Malcolm and Anna, and their chemistry is really lovely. And it's like,
right,
it's like you get the impression that they're very much in love, that, but also you get the impression that Anna, she realizes that there's a sacrifice that goes with, being able to share Malcolm with these kids who are in who are having issues. And so,
what I love, one of the things I love the most about the opening scene that M Night did was you see her down in that basement getting the bottle of wine, and then she comes back upstairs. She's cold, and her very first line is, "It's getting cold."
yeah.
Sets the pace. It's
Hmm.
what's coming, and it also allows them to introduce the sweatshirt
Yeah.
into the scene, because she hands him a sweatshirt, which helps with wardrobe down. I mean, it was brilliant. His
Hmm.
snare, so you get to he has all this wardrobe there, and that's the other thing that it just amazed me that I never noticed that his wardrobe really never
Yeah.
changed. But it was brilliant to be able to introduce that sweatshirt so that he
Hmm.
did have some options to go with. So I mean, everything was so in that opening sequence just set it all to the pace that you were going to continue through the entire movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and the lighting of when they get into the bedroom is just it's perfect because of the fact that you really get the sense that something is not right even before you see the
Right.
glass in the broken window from the broken
The broken
window and then
glass.
Donnie Wahlberg's character. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Donnie Wahlberg is phenomenal in 3 minutes of film, and it's not just the
Yeah,
look.
3 minutes. Yeah,
And it's not just the
it
look.
was the performance. I mean, he ate up the screen. It's just an amazing performance.
Yeah.
One that I feel kind of gets overlooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the that's it's one of those fantastic things because of the fact that it's that's the scene that sets everything in motion. Like you see him get
It really,
shot,
yeah.
you see Donnie Wahlberg, he's going to commit suicide, and you see all of that. Then you cut to 1 year later.
And the great thing was there's very little blood in this movie. I don't know
Yeah,
about you, but when I went to see this movie, I went to go see a horror movie because, the trailer kind of led us to believe this was going to be a horror movie,
right.
and it starts out and you think it's going to be a horror movie, and you're not really sure where it's going to go, but really you really don't see I think he maybe has a little bit of blood on the front of his shirt,
Yeah,
but you never see Don Wahlberg pull the trigger. You hear
yeah.
it, but you never see him actually blow his head off. So there's very little blood. And then after that scene, it is literally halfway through the movie before we get to another good, scary scene, which is to me amazing for something that we thought was going to be a horror movie.
Yeah. Well, and it's and that's the thing. And that leads me to bring up the fact that it's like I remember the trailers for this movie, and the thing that's so striking about the trailers for this movie is yes, you have yes, you have Haley Joel Osment saying I see dead people, but you also that movie was sold the marketing of that movie sold it as kind of a conventional Bruce Willis thriller.
Right,
you're going to have
right.
supernatural elements of it because of I see dead people and all of that stuff, but you saw other things that made you think, oh, this is going to be a very, this is going to be another Bruce Willis movie where he runs and shoots up stuff, and it's not
right.
that.
Well, it's funny though because I never really thought that. I never really, I kind of went into it as it's going to be a horror movie.
Yeah.
I was kind of I thought it was refreshing that it actually wasn't Bruce Willis with a gun on a high rise or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's a credit to Shyamalan, and it's like he does rightfully get some crap for some of the movies that he's made. But the fact of the matter is, you have that run of Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, which I do go back and forth as to which one is better. It depends on what day you catch me on as to whether which one I think is better. I think overall Unbreakable is probably a touch better, but The Sixth Sense is a pretty great movie. And
yeah, I would totally agree with you on that, but. Yeah. For me, I mean, just because The Sixth Sense had such a great impact on me and my career.
Yeah.
But to me, I felt like M. Night was constantly chasing the dragon. Yeah. Because his very first film just kind of set what people wanted from him, and he set the bar so high that that everybody was like going to see the next movies thinking, oh, where's the big twist, where's the big twist? And The Village, it doesn't get enough credit. I actually enjoy The Village, and I like the end. I like the twist at the end. I thought it was good. Did I like it as much as The Sixth Sense? No.
Yeah.
But and Unbreakable, I would say for me, it's The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and then The Village, and then after that I can't really find anything else that I like. I am, and I hate to be that way because I love The Sixth Sense so much that I want him to succeed. I like The Devil. I actually did like that. I forgot
never
about
saw that one. I
I
never saw
totally
that one.
recommend it. It's
So
really good. It's actually really good. It takes place all in an elevator, and
yeah,
that's it. But
yeah.
it's really it's pretty good. I kind of recommend that one. It's good.
So let's go away from the film a little bit. So what as somebody who's watched your shorts, I definitely see where the inspiration for from Sixth Sense comes from when it comes to your horror shorts.
Right.
So what exactly as as you got into your filmmaking career, what was it about the Sixth Sense that really infused it?
Well, like you said, if anybody has ever seen any of my horror shorts, they will know that there's a twist ending. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't made one yet that does not have a twist ending. And for me, that's what I love.
Mm-hmm.
That it had the Sixth Sense had that much of an impact on me that everything that I do, I feel like I'm also like him. I'm like chasing that dragon. It's like, how can I fool people? Because to
Yeah.
me, that's like the ultimate payoff as a filmmaker, that you've totally confused people, that you've made them think one thing and then it ends completely different than what they thought.
Right.
I love that kind of manipulation. I love to be able to mess with people's heads like that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Random, my first film, is so much a tribute to the Sixth Sense. I
Yeah.
mean, right down to the coloring,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're dead at the end, and they've been shot. It
Yeah.
was completely a homage to the Sixth Sense,
Mm-hmm.
because when it was time for me to make my first film, I felt that I needed to pay homage to the one thing that influenced me the most as
Yeah.
a filmmaker.
Okay. Yeah, and it's funny because I wouldn't necessarily I see it now thinking back about Random, but I it's funny like watching Random for the first time, I never would have necessarily put together the inspiration with the Sixth Sense, but now that I think about it, yeah, you're it's
It's
very much
all
there.
over it. Yeah,
Um
it's all over it.
and
Yeah.
it's a credit to how well you succeed in Random that I'm not just thinking, oh, hey, this is basically the Sixth Sense because of the fact that it's a different story.
Yes, it is
You're just borrowing elements like the color scheme. The
exactly.
red on the you know in Random it's black and white, but
Right.
in Sixth Sense it's definitely a more muted color with red being the predominant color throughout the film. I mean, you have
Right.
and whenever red tends to show up in the Sixth Sense, it usually means something dead is coming or something
Right, but
that's
you know what? I just noticed it because I was, like I said, I was rewatching this because I knew we were going to have this conversation, and every time I watch it, I notice something different. What I noticed this last time that I watched it was even Tony Collette's fingernails
mm-hmm.
are painted red until the scene in the car when she finally comes to grips with what's really going on, and then
Huh.
they're a completely different color. I mean, he was that specific with his placement of red. The red doors to the church, the red
Mm-hmm.
doorknob, the red fort that
Yeah.
he made with the blanket.
Yeah.
Every time there was like danger, it was
Mm-hmm.
the red showed up, the red balloon, the red sweat. I mean, the red is
Yeah.
everywhere in that movie. When you start looking for it,
Mm-hmm.
it's everywhere. But yeah, I had never noticed before that her fingernails were painted red up until the last scene, and then they're not red anymore. Which I
Now
thought that was fascinating, that
now
he was that precise with things.
now I need to rewatch the movie just to see that because yeah, I've never
Right?
picked up on that. I mean, like you said, most of the red in the film is very pronounced. It's very upfront.
Right.
But the fact that that is the
Right.
case, it's like okay, wow, yeah. Now I need to really watch that. And we haven't brought up Tony Collette, by the way, who a lot. I feel like a
Which
lot of people.
this
I feel like a
I think it was the first time that I was like ever really introduced to her. I don't
yeah,
remember. I know she probably a lot before that,
yeah.
but I remember just falling in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
She was just so amazing. That scene, that final scene in the
Yeah.
car with Cole, breaks my heart every time I
Yeah.
watch it. She is just phenomenal.
That scene and the scene after they've had she confronts him about the pendant, and then he comes into
Right,
her.
the bumblebee
Yeah,
pen.
and then
Right,
he comes into her room scared, and she just starts crying, and she embraces him, and
right.
she's like, "Why are you so cold?" And it's like, "What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong." And the thing that's so, and I feel like a lot of people kind of forgot last year when they were hoping and praying that she would get nominated for Hereditary, that they forgot that
Hereditary,
she
yeah.
actually did get Oscar nominated for The Sixth Sense. Rightfully
Right.
so,
Which
because
he
she's,
should. I mean,
yeah.
he should have won if you ask me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, I can't remember who won that year, but
I don't
yeah,
know who
I
won
don't,
that year, but yeah,
yeah. I mean,
should have been her.
she was tremendous, and she's tremendous in the movie. And you're right, that scene at the end with Cole in the car it just breaks my heart every time. It's like the
Me too. Me
they
too.
are so, he cast this so,
Because even, I mean, we talked about this earlier. You had mentioned how Cole's job was kind of mending things, for people and correcting wrongs
yeah.
and all of that. Because he does it for her too.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently, I don't know what kind of relationship exactly she had with her mother,
Yeah.
but he tells her story about that her mother was there and saw her dance,
Mm-hmm.
and that meant the world to her,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, he does it for her too. He fixes her relationship
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, and part of why he does that in that moment is because she's just had to miss a performance of his
Right.
in the school play, and she's apologizing for it, and that's part of what is puts it in his head, like, I'm ready to communicate with you now. Here's what's
Right.
been going on with me. And Haley Joel Osment, and the way he casts these characters, the casting of those four characters is so important, including Cole and Anna as well. And I
Mhm.
I always, and Bruce Willis. I mean, Bruce Willis arguably should have been nominated for this performance too.
Right.
He should have been Oscar nominated for this too. It's one of his best performances.
I
Um,
agree. Did you know that he had to make that movie? Have you heard that
I
story
don't
about how he
no, I
had
don't
to make that
remember that.
movie? He had to do, he had some sort of deal with, I believe, Disney at the time to make a movie, and things went really wrong on set, and he fired a bunch of people, and the movie lost. He never got made, so he was in the hole to them. So
Okay.
he had to sign a deal. He had to sign a deal where he had to do 3 films, and The Sixth Sense is one of those films.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it's like it's probably one of his most memorable roles
Yeah.
outside of the Die Hard movies.
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody can say I see dead people without immediately thinking about Bruce Willis. And
Right.
I mean, and that gets all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the, and you have the chemistry between him and Olivia Williams when they're together in a scene. And then you have the
Right.
distance between them when they're together in a scene, but they're not supposed to be. There's a disconnect because of the nature of Bruce Willis's character. And then you have
Right.
the chemistry between him and Cole. And Haley
Hmm.
Joel Osment is just remarkable in this movie. He's so good at, you know, it's it's hard to, like, it's an easy cliche to fall into the idea of the creepy kid in a horror movie. And I mean,
Right.
it's certainly a long line of them over and over the years as far as horror. He, but the thing I like about the Sixth Sense is that it doesn't, it it does that in a different way because it we really see more of the character as we see him as a character, and we see him as a sympathetic character. I mean, he's very he's being he's having to react to what's going on, as opposed to, and if you think about The Ring a few years later, with Naomi
Mm-hmm.
Watts and then her son's sort of in the same vein of these creepy kid characters in horror, but at the same time, he's sort of what we expect from that cliche, and Cole
Right.
is somebody that goes beyond that cliche because of the fact that just how important he is to the entire movie. And
Right. I think the audience automatically sympathizes with him. And,
yeah,
I mean, and I don't know if other people feel this way, that some people may feel that they watch it through Bruce Willis' character, Malcolm's eyes. But for me, when I watch the movie, I'm Haley Joel, I'm
yeah,
Cole.
yeah,
That's that's whose eyes I'm seeing the film through, and I think that's pretty intentional, because if you're going to scare your audience with the scenes that are scary, you have to make your audience feel like this poor, scared, vulnerable little boy. And that's exactly who he was. He was perfectly cast.
yeah. And the thing that's and it you're absolutely right in that. I mean, it's really a shared. It starts with that first scene of them in the church together when
Uh-huh. Right.
Malcolm goes up to Cole and says, this is who I am, and I've been following you around and stuff like that. And
Right.
it's Cole is not quite sure how to feel about Malcolm, and I mean, to and it, but and we empathize with why, because of the fact that there's this seeming stranger, because we've never seen them interact. It's like you get the impression that
Right.
Crow's been watching him from a distance, and then you see you see Cole let his guard down the more Malcolm talks, and you start to see that, and he starts to see, okay, this is somebody I feel like I can trust.
Okay, so this brings me up to the only problem I have with this movie. I never ever, for the life of me, been able to decide if Cole knows immediately that he's a ghost, or that maybe he never knows that he's a ghost. I That is the one question that I cannot answer for this movie, because the what Cole says to him right before he leaves the church is, "I'm going to see you again, aren't I?"
Yeah,
It was like, and it's like, okay, what? But then the whole "I see dead people" scene.
right.
It's almost like he's trying to tell Malcolm,
Yeah,
"You're dead," and then the whole storyline, he's trying to, well, he was helping Malcolm the entire time. So this is my the one thing that I just have never been able to figure out with this movie that like drives me crazy. Doesn't matter how many times I watch it,
yeah.
I can't answer that question. I don't know if he knew or not.
I've always been of the opinion that he does know, and because of and I think if you watching the scene in the church, you kind of I feel like you kind of get that impression that he's not quite sure. First of all, you see him when you see him outside the church before he goes in to the church. You see him looking around. You don't see him look directly at Malcolm. So maybe he doesn't
Right.
necessarily recognize see Malcolm at the time, or maybe he doesn't, and it's just Malcolm happens to. That might be the first time like Malcolm has. I don't know. It's
But why is he not scared of him like he is all the other ones? If all the other ghosts scare him, so why? I mean, he is scared of him at first, but not like petrified scared. Is it because they are in the church and he feels like he's safe with them because they're in the church? I mean, there's so many questions, and I
yeah,
would I would love to sit down
and
tonight
and
asking these questions.
that's a valid question because of the fact that and one that I always just assumed that yes, he knew he was a ghost from minute one, but I can completely understand why it's also ambiguous because, and
Right.
I would say partially because of the fact that it's at church that might be, that might be sanctuary, but also I wonder if part of it is the way Malcolm approaches Cole. He doesn't
Right.
approach
As a helping,
he
yeah, because he's approaching him like he's going to help him.
yes, he's approaching him like a human being, like an actual
Right.
human being. He's not approaching him like somebody who has been, who's been the victim of violence. Which, if you watch the other ghosts that you see Cole interact with, I mean, they're very clearly, violent, met violent ends. So, and
Well, so did Malcolm, though. I mean, he was shot, so he
yeah,
met a valiant end too. So,
it's
but maybe, well, see, and here's the thing I was thinking because the blood only shows up on his back. That's, I
yeah,
mean, which you never really see his back.
yeah,
So I'm thinking he just doesn't know that he's a ghost. But then towards the end, when they say goodbye after the play and everything's kind of taken care of, you feel like at the I think that, that Cole knew the whole time because of the speech that they
mhm.
have there because they're saying goodbye. It's like then it seems like he knows that he's a ghost.
Oh
So
yeah,
maybe it's like a learning experience for him too that he realizes, kind of like when we do, he's kind of realizing, that I don't know. It's so confusing for me. That's one thing I can't figure out.
yeah, and I, yeah. Now I'm questioning how now I'm questioning how I think about it. But ultimately, I mean, I ultimately the film works because of the dynamic between Malcolm and Cole. And it's like it's
Right.
because of the fact that it's a story that's happening to both of these characters. You feel like you're going on a journey with both of these characters, and there's an
Right,
emotional
exactly.
journey, there's a spiritual journey with both of these characters you're going on. And you have Cole, who to a certain extent I do think has, I mean, he obviously, I do think he obviously knows before we come to the moment that I see dead people. Obviously, he knows that he's been seeing these things for a while,
Right.
but I feel like with the great thing about Crow is that Crow's basically Crow has to earn his trust the way a therapist basically has to earn the trust of their client. And that's kind
Right,
of
and
how
right
it's
in there, that might be the answer to my question right there
yeah.
because when they first meet, I mean, first obviously they meet in the church, and Cole's very standoffish from Dr. Crow, and then the next time we see them is in the apartment,
Yes.
and he's left him, and he's very, very leery of
Mhm.
him at that time. So maybe that is the answer to my question is that he's slowly getting over the fact, and so that would make him a ghost the entire time. So maybe
Yes.
that's why he's not scared of him towards the end is because they're building this relationship at the same time.
Yeah.
So
And also because of the fact that we get the impression based on the other times that Cole deals with ghosts in the film that Malcolm is not behaving like the other ghosts that he's used to interacting with.
right.
The
Well,
other
and here's the thing, which could maybe solve that whole thing is that the other ghosts, every time the other ghosts showed up, they were mad, they
yeah,
were angry, which is the cold and everything, because that is kind of explained that that it's always cold when they're around.
right.
Uh, and you never see that when he's with
Mhm.
Dr. Crow. You never
Yeah.
see him that it's cold or you see his breath or anything because Dr. Crow's not being mean towards him.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and also there's the important second part of the I see dead people, which is they don't know they're dead.
Right, right.
That's the other important thing
To me,
too.
that's kind of like their crescendo of their
Yeah.
relationship, where everything kind of changes after that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like until that point that there's Cole's still not 100% sure of Malcolm,
Right.
and it's kind of like at that point where everything shifts and they become more of like a team and working together.
Mm-hmm. Well, and by that point, he's really earned Cole's trust, and
Right,
he's it's gotten to that point and where Cole can feel comfortable to admit, because of the fact that Crow is the way Crow interacts, he doesn't he it's the performance by Willis is really interesting because of the fact that he doesn't really he's treating, how best to explain this. Um it helps It's important that Crow's a child's psychologist
right,
because and we see that he's gotten the award from the city at the beginning, and so
right.
we
No
know that he's
children.
good with his job,
Right, and the
and
children are very important.
also he knows how to connect with children. So
Right,
that's an important part of the equation too. So it's like he knows how, and Crow has laid all of this out to Cole in the church. Like, hey, I got an award at one point. It's like, I'm supposed to be pretty good at my job and
right.
all that. Um, I love that this we haven't talked about it. And you mentioned the cinematography in those movies fantastic. The
Yes,
score is always been one of my favorites by James Newton Howard.
yes.
Such a beautiful piece of scoring on his part.
Although he almost gave away the ending when the soundtrack was released, right? Because the final song is called "Malcolm Is Dead."
Oh wow, I forgot about that. I
Yeah, so almost gave away the twist ending with the soundtrack release. So yeah, that's which if anybody was paying attention, they might have noticed that.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, it's like and the funny thing is, it's like earlier in the summer, uh, that happened with the Phantom Menace as well. There's a cue on there called Qui Gon's dead, and it's like, or
Right.
Qui Gon's funeral. It's like, oh hey, I guess he's dead then.
I guess he's
Um,
dead.
but I mean, I think so. I think the thing with that one is like, Star Wars is obviously Star Wars. It is what it is, and it's like that
Right.
one's going to be a bigger seller. It's like soundtrack fans. Soundtrack fans are more the thing for like a soundtrack for The Sixth Sense, even though it's phenomenal music. So it's not going to be as well noticed. So it's like
Right.
if but yeah, if you I didn't even think about the fact I need to look up that soundtrack and
Yeah.
see that it says Malcolm is dead. It's
And
like,
it could have
yeah.
been changed. I remember reading that years and years ago that supposedly he almost did that. Almost, and
Yeah.
I don't know if they changed it or not. But originally, that's what it was called. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's one of those things. This is There's a lot to unpack about this movie, and I love the discussion here because of the fact that it's like now I see the thing is it's like now I'm thinking it's like how when at what point did Cole know that Crow is dead? And
yeah.
because yeah, I do think
Even Cole actually winds up. We keep talking about how it's all about healing and all of that. And I mean, Cole even because Cole's the one that tells Dr. Crow how to talk to his wife.
yeah,
Tells him to talk to her while she's asleep.
yeah.
And so he's kind of the one who solves his problem too.
Hmm.
So that Bruce Willis's character can move on to where he needs to go.
Well, and it's funny because of the fact that Cole essentially becomes a sort of therapist for the undead. in the
Right,
same way
exactly.
that Crow
The
was a
way that
child
Crow is there for the
therapist.
kid.
So I mean, he's basically, now that once he, they had that interaction with the he had that interaction with the girl, and so now you have that
And
dynamic where
let's let's talk about that scene, because really that is like one of my favorite scenes,
yeah,
is when Cole and Malcolm go to the funeral.
yeah,
uh, and he confronts the dad and gives her the videotape,
hmm,
and the way that whole story is told. Oh, and by the way, the stepmom who's the killer, she's in red.
yeah, yeah.
So,
That one I did notice.
of course, she's in red.
Yeah,
But the way that whole story is told,
hmm,
where we see they put the videotape in, and we see it all through this little girl's eyes of how this happened, to her. And it's so sickening, but at the
yeah,
same time, it's so beautifully told, that whole little story within this bigger story.
hmm.
It's just to me, I love that scene. I think it's just so well done.
Yeah, I mean that right in itself could be a short film. Like
Oh,
that whole
absolutely.
sequence, like them going to the funeral, and the thing about that funeral is to to add to the storytelling is that you hear snippets can of dialogue between people attending the wake, and
Right, exactly.
you
So
get,
her whole story is told
yeah,
within the
and
funeral
and
scene
you
by just
also
them walking through.
hear the fact that now the other one is sick too, and it's like
Right,
that's an
exactly.
important thing, and so it's like,
Exactly.
oh
Yeah.
man, how are they going to do that? And it's like, well, then he goes up to her room, and she gives him the videotape, and it's you're right, that is just such a great piece of storytelling. It
It
really is
really
a short film in and of itself.
it really is. It's just perfectly done.
Yeah, and it's one of the and just the way that unfolds, the way you see, and there's such warmth in the show that, like, the sisters put on for the videotape, and
Uh-huh.
is such a warm little moment and stuff like that, and then you see her go into, and you see, oh, she's feeling well there, and then of course when the stepmother comes in, it's like you see the truth, and that the truth
Right.
is the stepmother's been poisoning her.
It's been killing her the whole
Yeah,
time. Right.
and so you take that with the dialogue you've heard about the sister, and you put two and two together. It's like, oh, she's doing it for to both of them, and
Hmm.
that's when it's such a there's such
And
a
well,
strong
I
sense
said
of storytelling.
stepmother, and I don't know, was she a stepmother? Now I'm trying to remember. She might have just been their mother, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, yeah, it really
I
does.
can't remember. Yeah, she might have been their mother. Either way,
Yeah,
it's probably the scariest story that's told within that entire movie.
it really is. No,
To
I mean
know that.
it.
But as it always goes, humans are the biggest monsters there
Yeah.
are. They are way more to fear than
Hmm.
anything else. So
Yeah, and then you have and the thing is, it's like you have this scene in the at the party where Cole gets trapped in the in the
in the
closet, or the room or closet, whatever it is, I don't know,
yeah,
but
that is like the weirdest house.
it really is. But but the thing is like you have that where it's basically it's a scene of bullying, like the kids are bullying him, and so you have another example of how humanity is, humans are more dangerous to you know to children than these ghosts are. So it's another thing for, but at the same time you see what Cole looks like after he's released from that room, and then that's
Right,
where
right in the hospital, because
yeah,
that did the whole hospital scene. Yeah.
yeah, and
And our wonderful, wonderful performance by the director himself.
yes, who keep
Not so wonderful. He should not cast himself.
well, and the part of the problem is he kept giving himself bigger and bigger roles to where he basically has supporting role in Signs.
Right.
That was almost as big in the movie as like Joaquin Phoenix's role, and yeah, he's not
Yeah.
that good of a
Not
director.
happen. No.
I mean, at least with The Sixth Sense, it's just that one.
Seriously,
scene.
what's up with directors casting themselves?
Well, and I think with Shyamalan, I think that's sort of the Hitchcock inspiration of like
Right.
director making a cameo in his films. The difference is
Right.
Hitchcock never spoke. He just quick one
He's
off.
just there. Exactly.
Bam, in the scene, in the frame, out of the frame, he's done. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a director who cast herself a lot, I can say it's not a smart move.
But see, you're also a working actress, so
Right.
that's a different situation.
It is a difference. It is. It's a complete because that's where I started. So
Yeah.
I have that always to fall back on. So.
Yeah. But yeah. So a little bit of that, because I can't remember if I asked you this when we did an interview a few years back. As how is it as what's the biggest challenge as far as di- acting in a movie that you're directing, or directing a movie that you're also acting in?
It slows everything down. That's the only problem with it for me, because I have to go back and I have to go see. I go and I check and see how the scene looked.
Yeah.
Because you have to, because you're in it, you can't really see that well. Or you have a cinematographer that you trust so much that you don't have to do that, which I do. I've worked with cinematographers that I do trust that much, but then I'm like, well, I just want to make sure.
Right.
I just want to make sure. So it takes longer because you are always going back and checking to make sure that you got what you needed in the scene, which is really difficult with like Random, because in most of Random, I'm laying flat on my stomach with blood all over my back and can't move. So
Yeah.
they physically would have to stop and bring the monitor to me so
Right.
that I could watch it. Because I couldn't move, and every time I did move, I would get more blood someplace that wasn't supposed to be, and that would ruin the shot. So yeah, it's difficult. I don't recommend it. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't stupid like I am.
But yeah, so obviously, I mean, obviously we talked about the difference between you being an actor in your movies versus Shyamalan being an actor in his movies.
Right.
He's coming out from a director making himself a cameo in the movie. You're somebody who came from acting who is also directing. So there is definitely a big change in there, and yeah.
And I don't have much money or studios staring at me when I'm doing it.
This is true.
So I can pretty much do whatever I want.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really wanted to bring up. Is there anything you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I was just trying to think if there was something that we haven't hit on in this movie, because there's so much.
Yeah.
I mean, so much to talk about with this movie. I can't think of anything. No.
Yeah, I and the thing is, I do think it holds up. It's one of those things where, especially if you have a movie with a twist ending, the big challenge is, does it hold up on repeat viewings?
Right.
And I think, and yes, there are some that can kind of fall apart once you know the twist. The thing, and you pointed to it, when you were talking about your first experience watching the film, is that when you go back and revisit it, it's like you're watching to see how the movie did what it did and how it set up what it did. But one of the other things that's so fantastic about this is that I do think that this movie basically, the thematic elements really do come through, and that's
Right.
what makes this movie rewatchable, I think.
Right.
It's not.
I mean, the first time I went back to rewatch it was because that I wanted to catch all the things that I didn't catch the first time.
Yeah.
Because because like I said, I felt like I'd been duped. I felt like, somebody had pulled the rug out from under. I mean, I honestly, I think it was like the last showing of the night, or I probably would have turned around and just gone right back into the theater and watched it again. It was that jarring
Yeah.
for me. So yeah, it's just one of those things. And now, I mean, years and years later, as a filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
I watch it to see how he did it.
Yeah.
Okay, what little things was he doing that, like looking at the scene between Tony Collette and Bruce Willis in the
Mm-hmm.
living room, and how did he pull that off? How did he make me think that they had some sort of conversation before the little boy came in there?
Yeah.
And because they didn't, they
Mm-hmm.
obviously didn't, and the dinner with his wife, you just assumed
Yeah.
that, they and that's a brilliant, if you want to study how to, like, ignore your scene partner, that is a great that is a great little scene to watch, because that it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
to, play a scene with somebody and try to make people believe that these two people are in that scene, and at the same time act like that person is not in the scene. That is,
Right.
I mean, that's a conundrum. I can't even fathom how they got through that scene. It
Mm-hmm.
would be almost impossible for me.
Yeah. And that's one of the that's something that's so impressive. And another scene that's sort of like what you were talking about with the dinner scene, and then the scene with Tony Collette and Bruce Willis. It's like that's where the way Shyamalan edits the movie and the way he
Hmm.
stages the movie. Another one is when Olivia Williams is talking to the the guy that she's kind of the helper at her
The young
store,
man, yeah,
and
Elfina.
like you have, I don't know what happens to the window, whether Bruce Willis like
Yeah,
hits the
I just
window or
always kind of
something like
assumed
that.
he threw a rock or something.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the next thing you see him walking away. But yeah, I mean, and it that is one of the great things about film is that the way people bring the film to life visually, and from a visual standpoint, to make us think one thing even when what they're really doing is something else.
Something completely
Yeah.
different, exactly.
And
Right. It goes back to what I said earlier, and the reason why I like making the kind of films that I make with the twist ending is because I do like manipulating people. I
mhm,
love the power that you kind of get from that feeling of, basically manipulating an audience for however long they're sitting there watching your film. So
yeah.
it is a great sense of power to be able to do that to somebody.
Hmm. Well, Cindy, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm glad we were able to talk about The Sixth Sense. It's definitely
I
it's one of the movies that stands out in that year. It still stands out as one of the great movies from that year,
I
and
agree.
it's something that the career the career Shyamalan had afterwards. It has some bumps in the road, but overall you sort of see you do see him starting to get some of that ability to surprise us that was so prevalent in this movie coming back.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for doing this. I mean, you know what? 1999 was a really good year,
Yeah, it was.
especially for the movies. It would, when you asked me about this, I guess maybe late last year,
Yeah.
and you asked me what movie I'd be interested in doing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there were so many good movies that year. How am I supposed to? And then of course, The Sixth Sense came to mind, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh well, obviously that's got to be the one.
Hmm.
So I appreciate you asking me to do this. It's been fun.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Cindy Maples for joining me on the Sixth Sense. It's really good to be able to get to that, and it is a movie that I think holds up extremely well on repeat viewings. If you haven't seen it in a while, I would definitely recommend doing so, because it is a movie that it it's a movie that holds up from that year, and I think has a lot more to say than maybe people were led on after being surprised by the ending. So that's it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. We come to a couple of the other big horror movies from 1999 in the coming months as well. And November and December is going to be wild. I've got a lot of movies left to cover, left to um, record, and I hope to get to as many of those as possible. I hope to get to everything. We'll see. But for now, this is Brian Scuttle. Hit me up on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. Check me out at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel and subscribe there. And always check out my print reviews and blogs at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.